You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another Top 10 video. This is one I've been meaning to do for quite some time, but I'm only now just getting around to doing for a couple of reasons. Number one is I keep reworking this list, and number two, picking out what constitutes a sitcom is difficult, because there's many shows that blend genres. You know, there's dramedies that are sitcoms, but also there's some that aren't. At the end of the day, a sitcom is a situational comedy, but a lot of the times there's tropes and certain aesthetic and themes and things like that that are consistent with what you would consider a sitcom. But at the same time, there's plenty of shows that don't fit that mold that are still quote-unquote sitcoms. So that in mind, I also had to put some criteria on this to narrow it down, because there's also lots of animated shows that are sitcoms, right? The Simpsons, Family Guy, I think South Park technically. So this will not include any that are animated. I have allowed for stuff that's not strictly just like live-action people, specifically for one entry on this list, and you'll see, but nothing that is strictly animated, no cartoons, nothing like that. Another thing is, if I did British sitcoms, that would be an entire list of its own. So to try and narrow this down, I decided to strictly make this an American sitcoms list. So this is my top 10 American sitcoms. Again, by no means definitive, but let's just jump into it, because I've rambled on enough as it is here in the intro. At number 10, we have Loudermilk. Now, this is a show I've only just started watching. I'm probably, I think, 6 episodes in, something like that. It's been really funny. It's also technically a dramedy, but I would still say it is a sitcom in a way. Like I said, it's hard to determine what actually makes something a sitcom. I tried to keep this pretty traditional, but this is one on this list that I think you could argue whether or not it is. It's definitely a comedy. It's also a drama, but it's definitely a comedy first before being a drama. I've really enjoyed this show. I'm only, like I said, like 6 episodes in or so. So that's the only reason that it's ranked so lowly, is because I haven't seen that much of it. But I've enjoyed what I've seen so far quite a bit. I really like the character that Ron Livingston plays. He plays a total fucking asshole alcoholic character who I really like. And he also runs like a AA meeting group. It's a whole lot of fun. He's very antisocial and a fucking dick to everybody, and that's what drew me to this show so much. I quite like the character. And the character himself, incidentally, is named Sam Loudermilk, hence the name Loudermilk. His dad's also a great character, who's even more of a piece of shit than he is by, like, a lot. Probably one of my favorite characters, though, is Cutter, who's this big, black, buff former cop who takes his job as a sponsor really seriously. For this guy named Tom, who's not actually an alcoholic, but got put in the meetings to cover for his boss for court-ordered appearances. And Cutter's intensity is insane. Like, he literally, like, kidnaps Tom, and, like, gets really aggressive with him. He tases him. It's fucking great. Cutter's intensity is fucking hilarious. Loudermilk has been a very interesting show thus far, so I've quite enjoyed it. We'll see how it holds up as I continue. But as it stands, I thought it was worth mentioning on this list. Alright, next up at number 9, we have Louis C.K.'s show that he did as a sitcom that had little bits of his stand-up comedy in the show, because he played a fictionalized version of himself. Now, the show itself is very much the same kind of humor that Louis C.K. does in his stand-up, but he plays himself as a struggling father with 2 daughters. And it's very crude, lots of masturbation jokes, because it's Louis C.K. Lots of his sense of humor. So if you don't like his humor, it's definitely not a show for you, but it's very, very crude and crass, but it's very funny. It was my introduction to Louis C.K., and I quite enjoyed this show. Admittedly, it has been a while since I've seen it, but I remember I was watching it as it was coming out for, like, the first, 3 or 4 seasons, and I absolutely loved it. So it absolutely deserved a spot on this list. Alright, at number 8, we have one of only 2 kid sitcoms on this list, and I was debating whether or not to allow these to be included or to make its own list, but I don't really think there's enough, like, Nickelodeon-type sitcoms that I like enough to put on this list, so the 2 that I put on here is plenty. I suppose I could have also thrown on Ned's Declassified, but nevertheless, number 8, we have Drake and Josh. Drake and Josh is iconic. It's one of the most iconic Nickelodeon sitcoms, easily. Out of all of the Nickelodeon sitcoms, I think Drake and Josh is easily the best one. It's obviously, if those of you who don't know, which I feel like most people do, it's about Drake's mom marrying Josh's dad and the two becoming stepbrothers, and them being kind of like an odd couple type characters where they're polar opposites of each other, they get on each other's nerves, but they're brothers and they care about each other. Like, it's very much, you know, playing them off of each other and how radically different of characters they are, right? Drake is like kind of like a popular, stupid party boy, whereas Josh is like a smart nerd with no social skills. And I don't really feel like I need to go super in-depth on Drake and Josh, because I feel like most people know what it is. There's also their little sister, Megan, who's constantly playing all these pranks on them with these, like, traps and stuff like that, and outsmarting them. Of course, there's awesome side characters like Crazy Steve. Overall, Drake and Josh is a lot of fun, so it absolutely deserved a spot on this list as well. Number 7, the only other Nickelodeon sitcom on here, and that's Kenan and Kel. Now, it might be a hot take that I rank Kenan and Kel above Drake and Josh, but I fucking love Kenan and Kel. Basically, Kenan and Kel is the story of these two teenagers who constantly try to scam people or do get-rich-quick schemes to get ahead. And I love their fucking back and forth and, like, their little schemes and plots. Also, the series finale, Two Heads Are Better Than None, is fucking great. It has this headless knight that's, like, hunting them down, and it's got all this horror stuff in it. It's fucking awesome. Where Kenan, you know, he's the brains of the operation, but he's still pretty stupid. Kel is absolutely retarded. Like, Kel is, like, easily one of the stupidest characters in all of fiction, but that's what I love about him. And I love, like, Kenan's dad's hatred for Kel, because he does not like Kel, and Kel's just always hanging around his family and pissing him off. Kenan and Kel is easily my favorite thing to come out of the SNICK lineup, that's Saturday Night Nick, which was, you know, Nickelodeon's live-action block in the 90s. So, you know, all the stuff that came out of that, Kenan and Kel for me was the king of that. I remember I watched the finale when it came out. Kenan and Kel's a lot of fun. I just like them constantly scheming and all their little misadventures and, like, the absurd stuff that Kenan always tells Kel to get him at the end of the episode. It's also got a fucking theme song by Coolio, so that was pretty cool. Alright, number 6, we have Dinosaurs. This is the one I was talking about that's not, like, strictly live action, right? It's puppets. Dinosaurs is a family sitcom, but the twist is that the characters are dinosaurs. So it's anthropomorphic dinosaurs living in prehistoric times. Pretty standard sitcom plots, but with lots of funny prehistoric twists, right? Lots of, like, savage and over-the-top shit that obviously modern-day society wouldn't have. You know, things with the food chain where, you know, if a dinosaur eats another dinosaur, that's not a crime, that's just, like, normal. Or, like, in that culture, you get to throw your mother-in-law into a tar pit once she reaches a certain age. It's a very barbaric society, but it has, like, things reminiscent of our modern-day society, so it's a nice, funny juxtaposition of the two. Earl Sinclair is a fucking hilarious character, as is his boss, BP Richfield, who's a total fucking asshole. Overall, it's just a really great sitcom, and the dinosaurs themselves are really cool, too. I love the spin on it, and I constantly quote the 40 million helicopters and a dollar quote from the When Good Food Goes Bad episode. Also, the food has characteristics of its own, because all the food is like little animals and stuff that talk to the characters and things like that and are their own characters, so that's pretty funny as well. And of course there's, you know, the baby, you know, I'm the baby, gotta love me, and he's like really obnoxious and over the top to the characters. Like, I know there's actually fans that don't like him. I think he's great. I think the fact that he's so obnoxious to Earl is great, and I like his little sort of team up with the grandma and how much they both hate Earl. I think it's overall really funny. And some of the funny traditions and over the top barbaric shit of the dinosaur society is great. Also, you know, we're gonna need another Timmy. Like, overall, there's lots of great gags in this show. It went on for 4 seasons, and it had a really fucking dark and depressing ending where they all fucking die, which is not something you'd expect from a sitcom like that. But curiously, because the episodes aired out of order, that's not counted as the last episode when it was on Netflix, nor do I think it is on the disc itself, on the DVDs. So that's an interesting thing, that there's another episode after that on the set. Like, I think they should reorder it and have that be in its proper space at the end, because that's very clearly the finale, because they all freeze to death, and it's actually really dark. Alright, at number 5, we have Still Standing. Now, this sitcom is actually the whole reason I wanted to make this list in the first place. I'm not even joking, like, this is the one that I really, really wanted to talk about, and it's moved its place multiple times on this list. Originally, it was as far as number 2, but I've shifted it around as I've rewatched some of these, thought about it some more, and things like that. But I love this show, and nobody fucking talks about it anymore. So, Still Standing has Mark Addy, who played Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones. appear as the father, Bill Miller, who has him and his wife Judy and their kids are the main family, right? The humor's pretty similar to Malcolm in the Middle, where the characters themselves are morally questionable a lot of the time, constantly, being kind of assholes, but, they care about each other. But instead of it being like in Malcolm in the Middle, where the kids themselves are the bad eggs a lot of the time, although, to be fair, the parents have their moments in Malcolm in the Middle as well, for sure. But we'll get to that later, spoiler. The main thing in Still Standing is Bill and Judy are just fucking terrible parents, and they're just kind of like, basically they act like teenagers, even though they have 3 kids and are like in their 40s. Bill himself is very much the cliched sitcom dad. He's stupid, he's reckless, he's inconsiderate. Judy herself is like the former cheerleader, kind of high school slut who's a kind of a bitch and very underhanded, and also very inconsiderate, but a total hypocrite about it with Bill. Then she has her sister, who Bill has a pretty good chemistry with on hating on, because the two of them have kind of a rivalry with each other where they don't really like each other, and he's constantly insulting her for not ever finding a husband. Then, of course, there's their kids, Lauren, who's a teenage girl, who's a pretty cliched sitcom teenage girl, admittedly. And then the son, Brian, who's a male cheerleader. He's very nerdy, kind of effeminate. His dad's constantly kind of disappointed in him, but eventually, learns to love him. There are some tropes in this, for sure. But the characters are fucking great, and it's a shame that nobody fucking talks about this show. You can't even find this show anywhere. It is impossible to get a hold of this. I'm sure that there's, pirate sites that have it up there in, really shit quality. There's no official release in either digital or physical form. And it's a show that ran for 4 seasons, yet doesn't get the recognition I feel it deserves. It also had that guy who plays Todd Packer in it as one of Bill's friends. There's a lot of Bill's friends and side characters that are really funny, too. And it's just a damn shame that this show never gets talked about anymore. Because, like I said, I put it on the same level with Malcolm in the Middle with the kind of humor it has. Alright, now on to number 4, we have Wilfred. Now, this is one that I debated whether or not to put on this list, because it absolutely is a sitcom. Even Google says so, which it didn't say about Loudermilk earlier. Wilfred is definitely a sitcom, but it's also a dramedy, it's a psychological thriller. There's a lot of stuff going into it, and this is specifically the American Wilfred, obviously. But Wilfred is at its core a buddy comedy in a lot of ways, but I'd say that is more true of the Australian version in some regards. Especially the second season of the Australian version. But Wilfred, the American version, is my preferred version of the series anyway. And it's basically about a guy named Ryan who gives up on life and tries to take himself out, only to realize that his neighbor's dog appears to be a man in a dog suit. And he's the only one who perceives the dog that way. And so the series sort of spirals out of control with him becoming friends with his neighbor's dog, and trying to get close to his neighbor who he has a crush on, while also, going on these wacky adventures with the dog, and having the dog be a friend and kind of a Tyler Durden-type figure to him in some regards. And every episode ends with the main character, Ryan, played by Elijah Wood, learning some crazy lesson because of the situations that Wilfred puts him in. Wilfred is also one of my favorite dramedies, although the ending fucking sucks. I'll admit, I am not the biggest fan of the ending. I actually prefer the ending to the Australian version, because even though it ends on a similarly downer note, it never was a show that was, super, invested in, the mystery or anything. It was just much more of a really dark buddy comedy. It's fucking dark, the Australian one is. Way darker than this version. But this version is my preferred version. And it is a shame that it only got the 4 seasons. And granted, they could always do a 5th, because every time they would do a new season, it would retcon the ending of the previous season, which was kind of a running trope that they had in the show. I mean, hell, my Wilfred review was a huge video on my channel. It brought a lot of my fans here, including Corbin, actually. That's how he discovered my channel, was the Wilfred video. So there you go. Wilfred, it's a great show. I absolutely love it, and if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Alright, at number 3, we have The Office. Again, the American version, although I do love the British version as well. Like I said, if we do British comedies, that'll be its own list. The Office is easily the longest running of any of the shows on this list. It got 9 seasons for well over 200 episodes. And the show had an amazing cast of characters. It's a mockumentary about an American workplace, right? An office. The Office, as it were. And I assume most of you know all about The Office as well, because it's one of the most iconic pieces of television out there. Michael Michael Scott is an amazing character. Dwight is an amazing character. Creed's an amazing character. Ryan's fucking great. Like, the whole cast of characters is awesome. And I even like the last two seasons, which a lot of people don't like because it's after Steve Carell left the show, so Michael Scott was sent off the show. Though I do think they gave him a really good send-off at the end of Season 7. Season 8, in particular, I think is actually really underrated. I actually really like Robert California as a character because he's this weird, rich, elite weirdo. And I liked a lot of the stuff with Andy as the manager and stuff like that. So I do really like Season 8. Season 9 is probably the worst season, but I still like it. I have my own issues with Season 9. It's got a good finale, and I actually really like the episode The Farm, which is like the most hated episode for whatever reason. And people don't like it because it has very little to do with The Office, but I guess just because I like Dwight so much as a character, that never bothered me. I fucking love The Farm. Like, yes, I know it was a backdoor pilot made in order to make a spin-off, which, hell, I would have watched that spin-off. And I think it's easily the most underrated episode. It's not my favorite episode by any stretch. That's probably got to go to, like, Dinner Party or something like that, which is also a pretty, cliched answer to say is the favorite episode, but there's a reason for that. It's fucking great. Also, Scott's Tots is good. I don't know why everybody bitches about it being hard to watch. Scott's Tots is a fucking great episode. But yeah, I think most of you know what The Office is. It's fucking hilarious. It does cringe comedy at its best. It makes you uncomfortable in some regards with just how fucking awkward situations could be. Not to the extent of Peep Show, but it can get pretty up there. Alright, on to number 2. We have Malcolm in the Middle. Should be no surprise that this is on this list, especially since I heavily hinted at it earlier by saying spoiler. Malcolm in the Middle was originally going to be my number 1 on this list when I started making it years ago. I fucking love Malcolm in the Middle. It's a family sitcom about a dysfunctional family, as a lot of these ones on this list are. But it's very much its own beast. Malcolm in the Middle doesn't have a live studio audience. There's no laugh track, nothing like that. The family's last name is never said in the show, although it is Wilkerson, according to supplemental material, such as the DVD descriptions from the Region 2 release. Because in the UK, when they reran episodes, they would actually refer to the families as the Wilkersons in promos, which Wilkerson actually was said in, like, the original unaired version of the pilot, because there was a gag where this kid asks Malcolm what his last name is, and he says, Wilkerson, why? And then the kid's like, oh, then who are the pariahs? But yeah, the family from Malcolm in the Middle is a bunch of great characters. Hal is easily the best, played by Bryan Cranston. Easily, like, one of Bryan Cranston's best roles. Obviously, Walter White is his best role. But this is a close second. Malcolm himself is a genius, gets put in a gifted class with a bunch of social outcast nerds, and that's kind of the premise of the show. Although I do like that later on the show starts to focus less and less on Malcolm and focus on the family more, because I actually think that the family members are far more interesting than Malcolm. Like, Hal, Reese, and Dewey are easily, like, fucking great. Francis is fucking great. All of the characters in the family are better than Malcolm as characters. My favorite being Hal, then probably Francis, then Reese, then Dewey. There's also some amazing side characters like Craig or Abe Carnarvon. The show itself went on for 7 seasons, and I've watched through it at least 10 times, if not like 12 or 15. Like, I've watched through Malcolm in the Middle a lot. I fucking love this show. Malcolm in the Middle, to me, is like peak television in a lot of ways. Now, it's not number 1 on this list, but it is number 2 for a reason, because it's fucking great. And again, like a lot of them on this list, I'm sure you guys all know what Malcolm in the Middle is. It's fucking awesome. It's hilarious. And if you haven't seen it, check it out, because you are really fucking missing out. Alright, before we get to number 1, let's mention some honorable mentions. Because at some point, there were other things on this list. For instance, The Bernie Mac Show was originally on this list. Another great dysfunctional family sitcom. I haven't seen the whole thing, admittedly, but I've seen the first season or 2. And Bernie Mac has a similar gimmick to Malcolm in the Middle, where he, like, stops time and talks directly to the audience. Because Bernie Mac is our point of view character, and he plays a fictionalized version of himself. And it is a really funny dysfunctional family thing, with Bernie Mac himself being like the controlling father. Another one worth mentioning as an honorable mention is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's one that I grew up watching. I liked a lot as a kid. But I haven't seen it in so long, I don't think I could justify putting it on this list. Bernie Mac just missed out. This one missed out primarily because I can only remember like a couple of one-off jokes and specific things. Although that episode with Will's dad is easily one of the best episodes, and it's fucking great. I do remember that. I also remember vaguely an episode where, like, someone gives birth in, like, a taxi. But it's been so fucking long since I've seen it that I just couldn't include it on the list, but it is a good show, and I did love it growing up. I guess one that I will include as an honorable mention will be Parks and Rec, although honestly I don't care that much for Parks and Rec. I mainly just like Ron Swanson and Andy. Like, those are the two characters that I really like. I don't even remember Andy's last name. I just know that he's played by Chris Pratt before he got, like, super huge in movies and stuff. Those are, like, the two characters that I like, was Ron and Andy, because Ron Swanson is great. Like, Ron Swanson himself does justify the show existing. I will say that. And there are a lot of jokes in the show that I did like. But it's one that grew off me over the years. I liked it a lot when I first saw it, but I realized there's a lot of shit that I really didn't like in it. But Ron Swanson makes it worth mentioning as an honorable mention at the very least. Another one that's absolutely worthy of an honorable mention is MASH. Now, I haven't seen that much of MASH, but what I have seen I've really liked, and I like how dark it is for a sitcom. Again, unfortunately, I haven't seen a ton of it, so I really couldn't put it on the list proper. But MASH is absolutely worth mentioning as an honorable mention, because it's such a unique show. Alright, we're finally on to number one, and number one is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Always Sunny in Philadelphia is one of the funniest shows on TV. It's got a cast of characters that are the peak definition of dysfunctional. You got Frank Reynolds, who has his two legal kids, because they're not actually his kids, but they're legally recognized as his kids, Dee and Dennis, who, again, are not his kids, but he thought they were, and he raised them. And then, of course, there's Charlie, who he thought was his son for a while, and then he eventually did actually adopt Mac as well. And basically, it's this group of these crazy misfits who are very unhinged, sociopathic, and over-the-top, who run a bar in Philadelphia. The show features an iconic cast of side characters as well, like Rickety Cricket, the McPoyles, Bill Ponderosa. Lots of shady characters. All of the characters in this show are fucked up in one way or another, and that's part of what makes it great, is all of these characters are skeevy, kind of slimy people, and that's what I love about it. Dennis Reynolds is easily one of my favorite fictional characters because he's a total fucking sociopath, but he's also fucking fantastic. He's great. With how unhinged he is, he's easily, like, one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. Frank Reynolds is also great, played by Danny DeVito, and he was originally just going to be, like, a guest character in Season 2. He wasn't even in Season 1, but he liked the show, and so he asked to appear in it, and then they actually put him on as a regular main character. This one actually might be the longest running one on this list, now that I think about it. At least as far as time it is, because it's had more seasons than The Office by quite a bit, because there's literally 16 seasons of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yeah, it's longer running than The Office, but it definitely has less episodes. But there you go. Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's fucking great. Once again, it's one that I figure most of you know what it is. But if you don't, check it out, because it's really funny. These characters are all terrible people, and they become worse and worse as the show goes on. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my top 10 sitcoms. It's a very personalized list to me, and obviously it's not definitive, because I've rearranged it so many fucking times. And I took forever to get it out. But I hope you guys enjoyed. This has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one. Toodles!